this is Chess Optics here, presenting to you another game that I played in a 10-minute time control. Hopefully there's something that another chess player can gain from what happened during this game. Of course, no games, and especially this game, is without flaws, which you may find if you look with an engine. However, in this game, my opponent overlooked a tactic, and sometimes this can happen when you're playing and you're concentrating on what you want to do more than what your opponent has planned. So we start the game out with d4. I play d5, bishop to f4, e6, a3. I don't know why he played a3. I would probably continue my development with the move like e3, knight to f3, try to bring the bishop to e2, but I don't know why he played a3. I play c5. I'm trying to get into a Tarrasch pawn structure. I've been playing the Tarrasch a lot lately, doing okay with it. According to my Aim Chess account, which goes over the games that I play on Lee Chess and chess.com, he plays e3, knight to f6. Just trying to get some development out, get my pieces out. So he plays knight to d2, knight to c6. I bring him my knights out. Basic moves, nothing dramatic here. He plays c3, so he's looking to create this pawn structure here, and this is, I believe, the London system that he's trying to play here. Sometimes you have to be careful playing these systematic games, because sometimes there may be some flaws in the thinking if your opponent doesn't follow what you expect him to do. And I play bishop to e7. He plays knight to f3. So here I realized that when he played this move, he cut the queen's defense off of h5. His bishop is kind of outside the chain, XYZ, but I know this is a major piece in the London system, so I decided to bring my knight over to h5 to chop this off, because it really has nowhere to go now. If he backs up, he gets chopped off. He goes here, he gets chopped off. Honestly, I would have gone here, but what did he do? He backs up. The reason why I would have gone here is because these pawns are crucial to getting the king out of the center of the board when it castles. Later on, you'll see that due to his recapture method, when I take the knight, which I do in the next move, he has some problems here. Now the h file is open, so already we see his king side structure, if he wants to castle this way, is pretty damaged already. So this is just another feature you can look at in the game. It gives you some ideas. And I play bishop to f6. Actually, I dropped a pawn here. That's a mistake, I believe, but he didn't see it. I thought he was going to come down and try and destroy my possibilities of castle king side by taking on h7 and then capture with the queen, but he didn't do that. I captured the pawn. Now I see that I had left it hanging. He plays e takes d4, and I play h6. Why let him play rook takes h7, queen takes, and we both have to go queen side if we want to get out of the center of the board, right? So we have bishop to b5, bishop to d7. He captures my knights. So was this a good capture? I'm wondering here. I don't really know why he just took the knight. I have control over e5 with the knight and the bishop, probably getting ready, but I don't know. So I take with the bishop. He brings his pawn to a4 again. So this pawn is moving again to a4 now. To me, I think it's probably just a waste of time. He should have left this pawn here. If he's going to castle queenside, eventually go queenside, because if you go here, there's some ideas that could actually put your king in trouble, as we see when the game progresses forward. Queen to d6. just bringing my queen up to d6 and maybe thinking about playing e5, maybe, you know, giving myself the option to open up the center of the board for this bishop. So I push, he captures. I have the option to be able to push this and unlock my bishop from behind the pawn chain. That's what I was thinking. If the opportunity presented itself, I would probably consider that. The next move he plays here is another pawn move on the queen side, b5. So that doesn't really address this idea of me trying to push to e5. And I really don't know how he could have, because if he tries to block with the knight, I capture with the bishop, queen captures, the knight comes here, he gets a tempo for a pawn. Maybe that's better. So he threatens the bishop. So now we realize what White's idea was. He wanted to counterattack on the queen side. I'm playing in the center. So there's this idea in chess that if your opponent plays on the wing, you play in the center, and it seems like that's what's going on here. So he attacks here and I'm here. So I pull back, right? He castles, I castle. But remember what I said, because of this capture earlier, he's already compromised his king side somewhat, right? There's a long end game that I looked at with the engine, which shows black is winning. Of course, you can take this and look at it on your own. That's not why I'm presenting this information here, to get engines involved. But so he captures, I capture, he captures, and I capture back with the queen. So what do we have here? I have an isolated pawn on d5. He has a double pawns on the g file. Is it compensation? Do they balance each other out? I also have the long range piece, which is supposedly favorable in the end game, the bishop, but with this pawn on the center file and then not having access to the long diagonal, it can only go here. I don't know. I don't see targets for the bishop besides g2. And then how do you organize an attack there? So I think it's pretty even. That's just my opinion. So he plays knight to f3, common move, attacking the queen. I move out of the way. He brings his rook over to e1. I bring my rook to c8. So his pieces seem to be just getting into position with no targets in mind, just empty squares, right? So, but I'm attacking the c3 pawn. These subtle differences mean that I have the initiative, and actually White has to respond to my moves. I didn't really have to respond to this move here because it didn't threaten anything. So that's another point that I want to make. When you're making moves, try and see if you can threaten your opponent, shift them around, get him to do things, because when he has to do something, there's a possibility that he makes a mistake. If he doesn't have to do anything, I mean, the possibility of the opponent making a mistake is not really as much pronounced as it is when you force him to make a decision. So he brings his knight over to e5, and I pull a bishop to f5, again attacking something. I'm attacking the queen here, right? So he has to do something about that. So he brings his queen over to b3, attacking this pawn. I bring my rook here, again I'm attacking the knight. There's two pieces on the knight, right? And there's only one piece defending. So what does he do? Now he pushes another pawn on the already weakened king side, f4. He just played this move, f4, right? Weakens this square, opens this whole diagonal, right? Something to consider. Bishop goes to d4. Excuse me, bishop goes to e4, right? So our light square bishop has a target now in the ending. It's defended, but it's still a target. Something to consider. Rook goes to c1. Now pawn goes to h5, trying to weaken the king side, White's king side, even more, right, by attacking the base of the pawn chain and creating a target here and then simultaneously another target here. Because if this pawn becomes weak or falls off, the knight becomes weak. But because this pawn is defending that pawn, I push this pawn to attack that pawn, creating a further weakness in the chain. That's the idea behind the move h4. He plays pawn to c4, and I'm looking at it like, does it really stop my idea? No, so I play it anyway. He captures, cool. I was prepared for this. Of course, I'm not going to weaken this now because he takes my bishop, but that pins the rook on the back rank, which means he has to capture, which he does. Pawn takes, and there's my idea. Now, look at the squares around the king. So earlier when I first started this, I was telling you that he overlooked the tactic, and he did. So he plays this, and I take the knight. Do you see what the tactic is if he captures back? I'll give you 10 seconds. Okay. 10 seconds are up. He did capture back, and is mate in 2. Mate. So, looking at that game, which was very short, and something that you could find, something to learn is that, okay, every capture, consider before you recapture. That's one lesson you could learn from here. And also realize when the squares around your king are weak and you have heavy pieces on the board like a queen and a rook, this is to be considered a dangerous situation. Even so, there's general principles that you should go on even if you don't see a direct attack. Just in general, right? For anyone watching this, in general, if you have a king like this with no pawns and a pawn here, right, he should just take this pawn with the queen, right? And before he does that, like what is the point of that? You put in pressure on f7, but it's defended twice. You think you're gonna just get a queen. So I'm thinking what he was playing on and hoping on was that after he played this, I would take it, right? And then he would get some check off and then pick my rook up. So, but this is way more troublesome than that. So you can't ignore your own king in approaching the other person's king. That's the main lesson from this. When your king is in danger, stop everything, secure your king, and continue your attack. And with that, this is another lesson from Chess Optics. And with that, I'm going to say, may your chess be the best, and may you learn and grow from these lessons. Peace. I'm out.